Got the serum.
The serum.
I got the serum. Chris, good morning.
I got extra light kombucha.
Oh, nice.
House made. You know how I made it?
Should you be telling us on air?
Well, I'll give you the secret. Accidentally left a drink in here for about the last week.
So are you gonna drink it?
Found it on my desk this morning.
LOL.
LOL. Tell me. Oh, this is gonna get bad. Tell me that you've never, come back from a weekend. You sit down at your desk, and you look in that sort of like that little bit of cold Tim's coffee or Tim's tea, or the mug. It's still sitting there. Tell me that you've never sort of held it there and thought to yourself, I'm just gonna have one sip. just one. Okay, let's do it in a different context. The equivalent of this is you kind of left the pizza on the counter last night and it's still in the box, and you walk into the kitchen and you're like, yeah, I really should have put that in the fridge. Oh, well, I'll have a bite. So here I am. The coffee's fresh. The water kombucha, I left it down here earlier this week when I was talking online with someone. So I feel good so far.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. Now, I don't drink Tim's coffee, and I rarely get the tea, but what I do is I have a bottle like this of water on my desk.
Yep.
And I'll leave it there. For example, I think it was half full when I left on Friday. So when I get there Monday morning and I'm running around setting up and I'm thirsty, I look at it like, I know it's just water, but I'm looking at it like, I probably shouldn't drink that. It's been sitting there for 2 days, just standing there, probably in the sun or whatever. I really shouldn't do it, but I do think about it. Now, the pizza, that's a whole other story. The pizza is a whole other story. I think I've gone there.
Yeah.
I think I've gone there. Actually, I have a funny story about that I was telling someone yesterday at hockey. So when my son was at his last tournament in London, it was a great tournament. Like he played really well. He played really hard. And so I found myself like at every team dinner or something saying, do what you like. Like you're playing hard. You're with your friends. It's for the weekend. Eat what you want. Which, like, to the chagrin of my wife, right? Like, what did he have for supper? Oh, nachos. And what? How is he supposed to play when you feed him that stuff? But anyway, it just reminds me. So here's the funny part to me.
The first part that you just said, the dad part, I think is funny too.
Okay, fair enough.
And I'll say flat out, I totally know that moment. And sorry, just to throw down, to get the dad bits in, that whole trying, like, you don't know, you think like you're doing your kid a kindness by saying eat what you like you really do. Like, you think to yourself, oh, okay, you had great behavior, or you like, that was an awesome day, here's the gift. But you don't realize how nice of a gift it is for you to be able to say things like that, like just to not have to have the lockdown parent kind of response of, you got veggies on the plate, buddy? You got some veggies there? All you've been eating is carbs. Was that even protein? Hot dogs aren't protein. Like, you know what I mean? But just to be able to say, eat what you like, that's the first part. There's that nice release of not having to kind of hold that one, let's say, dad rule. I think the second part to it is also the freedom that you're handing over to your kid. Like, and I think kids crave that. Like, just that whole, really? I get, and my son will pause in that moment, like, ask for something. I'm like, yeah, sure, sounds good. And he'll sort of just do this at me, like, and then he kind of like hustles off and takes care of it before the conversation changes. So I love that. That's a total dad. And I've also been on the other end of, really, you let him do that? I'm like, I like to think of it as me letting me do that. It was personal growth. My comfort zone as a dad.
Okay, so yeah, no, I appreciate what you said there. Makes me feel a little bit better. In the moment, like, he's with his team, they're having fun. I'm not gonna be the guy that's like, get a Cobb salad instead of the nacho. Like, I'm just not. It's not gonna happen, because we do make sure, like, it's not like he was eating junk the whole time. But so after their last game, they didn't have success. They didn't move on past the round robin. But after the last game, he played a wicked game. Like, you know, I had parents coming up to me saying, "Did you see that? Did you see what he did there? Did you see how the parents reacted to that?" So he was making enemies with the parents on the other team. Like he was on fire. So after the game, he comes out of the dressing room, and I'm like, "Okay, whatever you want." He goes, and yeah, I have to tell you this. In London, Ontario at the time, there was literally a blizzard. There was a blizzard outside. It was insane. He goes, "I want Dairy Queen." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I'd like to get a little blizzard." And I'm like, "You want?" I said, "You realize there's a snowstorm outside?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm good with that." I'm like, "Okay." So we find the nearest DQ.
DQ.
And I
fan food.
Yeah, fan food. I get him his blizzard, and I took a picture because I have him standing like by the window to show like there was chaos outside. And he's eating ice cream. We get in the car, and I'm like, "Okay, buckle up, whatever." And then I say to him, "So this is a snack. Like, what are we having for dinner?" his eyes just light up. You mean
There's more?
Yeah, like we're having dinner. I'm like, "Well, we surely can't tell your mom we didn't have dinner and all I fed you was ice cream. So we're having dinner." So I'm like, "What do you want?" He's like, "You already let me pick the ice cream." I said, "No, I don't think you understand. What do you want for dinner? You can pick. You had a great game. The tournament's over. Like, we're staying overnight because we have the room and we're going to hang out with some of the team, but it's over. So live it up because, you know, when the clock strikes midnight, this is all over kind of thing."
Yeah.
So we get pizza from a pizzeria we've never had before. So we get back to the hotel, we eat, and then we hang out with the team. We go to bed, and I have enough mind at this point to put the pizza in the fridge when we're done with it. Well, the next morning I wake up. It's well past midnight, right? Because I said at midnight this all ends. I wake up, I look over, he's not in his bed. So, and we had this really awesome room. So I get out of the bedroom and I look in the suite, and he's sitting in the kitchen at the counter eating cold pizza. And I'm like, "Oh my God, is this foreshadowing or what?" Like, this is totally going to happen in about 8 more years, probably not even. He's just, I find him in the kitchen eating cold pizza that probably him and his brother don't put in the fridge overnight. So that's the whole connection back to what you were saying. But it was a great weekend. The night before, the team went out for a team dinner, and he says to me, "Dad, I want to get nachos." I'm like, "Yeah, man, get nachos." He's like, "Okay." So I say, "Come over here." He comes over, he sits beside me, and we're looking at the menu, and we're kind of figuring out. I'm preparing him, right, to speak to the waitress to politely order his dinner in the right way. Which, I'm sorry, as a dad, it brings me joy in a restaurant when my children order their meal and they say please, or they say, "Can I please have?" And then at the end they're like, "Thank you very much." And the waitress is looking at us like, "Where'd these kids come from?" Now, they're not always nice like that, but when they do that, I feel this like, okay, I'm teaching my kid how to be a human so that hopefully he can be human when I'm not around, which is awesome. So we go over the menu. 20 minutes pass, the kid's food starts coming out. One of the dads is like, "Oh my God, Roland, did you order that for the table? Or is that Will's dinner?" And I'm like, "What?" So I kind of look over. He's got the biggest plate of nachos that I've seen.
The platter.
Pretty much. And this is the best part. There's all this chili on top of it. So I go over and I'm like, "Hey, Will, what's the meat sauce on top?" He goes, "Well, she said, do you want the chili on top?" And I said, "I can have chili with it?" And she said, "Yeah, she said it's an option." I'm like, "You and I didn't talk about that." And he's like, "But I thought, you know, Dad, what's the big deal?" kind of thing. I'm like, I just shaking my head. All the parents are dying, right? Because there are kids getting their wings with extra veggies on the side. I'm like, "Okay, can I have some?" He's like, "Yeah." So I eat some, and then I see him negotiating. Like people are coming, they're like, "Can I have some?" He's like, just take a couple. This is my dinner," or whatever. It was, anyway, he didn't finish it. We brought it back. I did put it in the fridge, and then he had some the next day. And now the whole world knows that my kid didn't eat any real food, but he had some real food, some veggies and fruits. Anyway, long story short, I'm glad we could dip into the dad stuff because now I want to turn a corner if it's okay with you. And it's kind of a dark. I want to go dark for a minute here.
Down a dark corridor.
You ready?
Okay, let's play.
Okay. I'm glad that we've started this podcast off with the dad component of what we do and who we are, because when was it? Yesterday. Yesterday, I had a really bad start of the day with the kids, like really bad. And when I dropped them off at school, we were still kind of arguing in the car. And as I'm driving away, I feel like I needed the Hulk smash gloves, but I didn't have them, and I had to go to work because that's what adults do. But I was in no mental shape to be with people for the next hour. Like I really was revved up. I needed to calm down. So I get to school thinking that 10-minute drive will help. It didn't help. And then I go into my classroom and I start setting up and I think time to myself will help. And still, we're talking now like 25 minutes have passed and I'm still up here. Right. And I need to be here for the day for like what I do. And right now I'm here and I'm like, how am I going to bridge that gap? I'm so mad. I'm so bothered. And I wanted to vlog about it. I wanted to get the camera, put it in front of me and just say, the work I do as a teacher, my home life and my work life, sometimes they meld into each other and it gets sticky and it's hard to pull them apart. And this was a moment where I was going to go on stage, in 20 more minutes to put on a show for, 22 kids. And I just wasn't feeling it. I was in no mental state. I was mad and I was having a hard time regulating and going from here to here. And I was really aware of it. I don't know why. I think it's because I just felt like I was on a timeline. I had to make it work. There have been other mornings where I've had a rough morning with the kids and it's not affected me the same way. So I think I was really, really, really stoked, pumped. Anyway, what saved me was we're learning about mindfulness this month. The whole school's learning about mindfulness. It's the umbrella skill of the month. And the VP came on the PA system and reminded everybody that our school social worker was doing a mindfulness activity in the library for 20 minutes that we were all invited to attend. And I said, and I'm like, I'm not going. Like I just said that to myself. I'm not going. I don't want to sit with people. I don't want to see people. But then something was like, no, you should go. Like, I think you should at least be forced to breathe properly, be forced to center yourself and to be mindful of what's going on and just sit with it. So the whole way out of my room and down the stairs to get to the library, the whole way I was like, I'm going back upstairs. I'm not doing this. And then I walked into the room and several people looked over and like, oh, Roland's here. Hey, Roland, how are you? And even then I was like, stop looking at me. Stop talking to me. Then I sat down, we started. And when it was over, I felt better. I felt better because I needed the time, I guess, to do something to try to pull the two layers apart. And then as I pulled them apart to keep it low and not let one rise again. And it worked. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that if there had not been a meditation that morning, a guided meditation, who knows how long it would have been. And who knows what kind of stress I would have experienced once the kids walked in. Because I would have to shift, whether I'm ready to shift or not. And I couldn't even vlog. Like, I couldn't even take my camera, put it in front of me. And I knew what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about, and I may this week, I wanted to talk about the two worlds and how when they collide, it can become very stressful. And a flip side is, so this time I came into work with my baggage from home, but sometimes I go home with my baggage from work. And it's as equally like devastating, and it affects more people. Like this example didn't affect anybody because I was okay when the kids came in, but Sometimes when I go home, it affects my kids, it affects my wife. And, you know, she comes home with it sometimes too, and it affects us. Like the one day she came home and she said, I was helping a child zip up his coat, and I wrecked his coat. And I said, what do you mean? And she goes, it just wasn't working. And I pulled and the whole thing just exploded. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, like, it literally, like the whole zipper, upper, everything, it just exploded. The kid's jacket's wrecked. And I said, well, what did you do? She said, well, I told him he could stay inside for recess and he could, you know, like he was rewarded. He could keep a friend in with them and they could do Lego or whatever. I'm like, well, that's good. So he didn't freeze to death. And she called home and said his coat's wrecked. I don't think he can walk home. And the parents dealt with it or whatever. But she says to me in a really sheepish look, she said, I went to the store and bought a new coat. And I hope that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like she's like, uh-oh, you know, what's Roland going to say? I went out and got like, you know, $40 coat. And I was like, that's fine. And it was interesting because she was waiting for me to not be fine with it. But I'm like, well, you broke the kid's coat.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't do it on purpose. And now you're just trying to make things right. I'm okay with that. I said, did you get a nice coat? Like, is it going to be a warm coat? She's like, oh, yeah, it's going to be warm and whatever. Then the next day she gave it to the kid and talked to the parents about it or whatever. And it was good. But I could tell, you know, she had been dealing with that since her last recess. End of the school day, an hour later, and then I get home. Like a lot of time, a lot of stress and a lot of time has gone into that and energy. And it's like, it's fine. And I hated that I was feeling like she was concerned about the whole situation. I'm like, you broke the coat, you made sure you did everything so that the kid wouldn't be cold when he left. And now you got him a new coat. Like, it's all good. We can move on. But it's not always that easy. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that the dad teaching thing is, you know, sometimes my female colleagues, they have a situation at school and they'll cry. Like, that's how they relieve themselves. They'll cry. That's how they do it, stereotypically. I don't operate like that. But I do hold that anger, rage, whatever you want to call it, about unresolved situations and then having to go and take care of other kids when my kids haven't been taken care of.
I totally get that. I totally get it. Your story rings so many bells for me. The pickup drop off deal flipped for my wife and I this year because of we're each at new schools. So I'm now on pickup and she's on drop off. And I know, so you do both. You do drop off and pickup? No, you guys.
I do drop off and then they walk home, and my wife usually gets here like half an hour after they've been home.
So the whole there's the relation, not the relation. The posts on that are kind of held by the drop off pickup, and then you have all the stuff that happens in between. And I didn't realize how deeply impactful what it meant to carry your kids through the day and to carry your sort of spouse, my wife, through the day, and to carry that energy through the day. Because I've had those moments too. I was like, why can't I feel like I'm totally blocked here. I'm just not getting to the work in the way that I normally do. My systems aren't working right. Like I'm kind of avoiding talking to certain people. I don't feel like I'm connecting as cleanly with the kids. Like something, it's being put through a fuzzy filter. And then I would go back to, I'm like, it was the drop off. It was the morning. It was that thing that just wasn't tidied or apologized for or addressed or spoken to. So many kind of like loose ends. And that was sort of like, I have that appreciation of that window. And you and I think we definitely talked about, the plan and the organization of getting out in the morning and what that takes. There's I think the intensity of just trying to hold to a plan to get to school also ramps up the emotional state, and then just cuts it off as soon as you drop the kids off. Like even the good stuff, and this is good or bad. I mean, but I would say even the good stuff carries you. Like if it was a hilarious morning on the drive in, or something happened in the morning, that energy carries over too. I think I just noticed more when, at the drop off, if there was something that just kind of shifted it away from what felt like a good family moment at drop off. And it's funny, this year I've shifted to the pickup. And at first my anxiety was so high, I think, about pickup, because not having a connection to the start of the day really created a strange vacuum. Like, sure, I got to the work, but it was on the opposite end of it. I didn't have information of closure about having a good drop off or a bad drop off, but I didn't have closure as in where my kids were, where my spouse was, is exactly where they should be according to the trajectory of a day. I'm not going to try and make it seem like everyone has to be in like their own kind of snap in space on the workday, but you definitely know that when everyone's got their schedule kind of clicking off in the morning, like you feel kind of good getting in the car. Like you're like, that was a solid kind of start. Everyone's got their lunches, your bag of work is in the truck. It's not still in the house, the driveway shoveled, like all the little bits that allow you to sort of leave and start your day are so powerful. So you talking about, that the emotions of unresolved, of the emotions of the unresolved, is fascinating to me. I know nothing about quantum entanglement, nothing, apart from the fact that it's a really cool concept of having a relation between things that are at a distance, like simultaneously things can happen. And I think really smarter people like to look at that in the point of view of sort of time travel and being able to sort of beam something from one place to another. But it kept on coming to mind as in this thing that happens and creates the relationship between two distant pieces. It makes me wonder what kind of a day my kids are having. So are they as well? Is my spouse as well? Maybe this is where the empathy comes into this. I wonder about if I'm all of a sudden just like, I want to throw my computer across the room while I'm doing marking, and it's just because I'm feeling an emotion, but I can't tie it to anything. I can't actually trace what's going on. It makes me wonder about, well, first my own family and how their day is going. But then I bring it back to my classroom and I wonder about that power of the kids in front of me. So what's the thing that is a shared problem? So it's not actually just the kid. They are still tied, this like kind of like quantum entanglement thing, and feeling at the exact same rate of maybe their parents or their guardian or their friends in another class. And you just start to get this like tone and color of emotionality that, it sort of speaks to, I guess, it speaks a little bit to the human condition. I think it also speaks to in class, like a day like that you would carry through the day is a day that, depending on how that emotion is managed, more dark stuff could happen. And it's, that idea of breakfast as the most important meal of the day. You can make it about food, but what if you made it about the relationship that nurtures you at that moment? What if you make it about the building and the connectivity and the being present that just happens to go along with the shreddies? That's my ramble on that.
I appreciate you talking about, or helping me make the connection that if my entanglement is causing me so much difficulty or conflict, what's it doing to a kid? Like I have thought about my own children. I hope that they're able to bounce back a lot better than me, because now they're going in a situation where they're not in charge, right? Like they have to answer to somebody. How are they going to deal with those interactions? How are they going to know when to back off? Like, and then the other part of that is my students, when they come in, they're off. I have one student who does a really bad job of hiding that they just had an issue outside with one of their parents. The young student doesn't do well with it. So I know right away, are you okay? The response is, yeah, I'm okay. I'm like, okay, well, listen, you don't look okay. So I want you to do your best to go along with the flow of what's happening in the room. But if you feel like you just need time or you can't do it because you're too busy thinking about a situation with your family, then just, I know, I'm telling you, just go, like, take your time away. And I'm not going to question you because I'll know why you're over there instead of over here with us. And, you know, she doesn't say anything. That's fine. She doesn't need to. None of them do. It's just, I try to make it as clear as possible to them. I'm there to teach you. So if you need something to help you learn and you have enough agency or courage or confidence to tell me, then do it, because I will give it to you as much as I can. And I don't know what it is. A lot of them don't seem to get that, but some of them do. And some of them will tell me, you know, like some will come now, they'll come right away and they'll say, I did not eat breakfast this morning. When that battle first started, they didn't want to tell me that. They just say, I'd like to have my snack now. And I say, well, you just got here, because me being me, sometimes I have a problem getting out of my space and into theirs. So I'm like, because then I connect what they're saying to my world. I'm like, how could that be? Like me and my kids just had breakfast. So how could you be hungry right now? Because you probably had breakfast too. And I'm like, no, you didn't have breakfast, because there might not be any food, or you might have just woken up and your parents are like, get out, go. You got to go to school. That was an issue at first with them. Now it's not. They just say, hey, Mr. Chidiak, I'm going to grab something to eat. Go for it. And that sounds like such a simple thing. But for me, I'm pretty thick. And so for me, when I build my classroom community and we work together and I understand my students, and my students are relatively open about, like, I didn't eat, so I need to eat. I'm like, yeah, go eat. It's that open communication as much as it can be with your students who are, you know, elementary. It's a trust that comes with time, that comes with, they'll see that I'm not being a jerk. You know, like there have been a couple of times where I've been caught where we'll be doing something and I'll look up and I'll say, Jimmy, like, what are you doing, man? You should be here. And then Jimmy will kind of, like, he'll grab his food and kind of just like lift it at me like, you said I could. And I'm like, whoa. You know, I'm like, oh, Mr. C, sorry. Carry on. Come on over when you're ready. Like, I totally shift. I go from just like being a regular dude, like, get over here, you have a job to do, to being, oh, yes, we've negotiated this. You're eating. So eat and then come when you're ready. That happens to me a lot. And I try to build that in. I try to tell them, kids, listen, this is what kind of teacher you have this year. Sometimes I'll go off the handle. And I'm going off, even though I told you could do something. I just need you to look at me and say, remember, you told me I could. And then I just go, I just shut down. I'm just like, whoop, you're right. And when I say go off, I'm just like, hey, what are you doing over there? They're like, you said I could. And I'm like, oh, that's right. You know, I don't know if you have that moment or if that exists in high school the same way it exists with me, but I'm dealing with 7-year-olds, right? Who are, sometimes they're everywhere. They're like little ants. They're everywhere doing something, collecting their food. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing over there? And they're like, remember, you said I could da-da-da-da-da? Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm just going to go away now.
No, I get that. And it does happen at high school. It's funny. I think that was in part one of the binaries that I dropped, that video about my one of my students telling me that they love that I make adulting look difficult. And that was one of the components that the student also mentioned. Like, sometimes you forget some of the stuff that you say. She said, you know, you often forget some of the stuff, that the permissions, like, you sort of like will call something out and then you're like, oh, wait. We talked about this, didn't we? Like, she said, you got pretty good at catching yourself. And then I was like, yeah. And then she said, then you would apologize and say, sorry, my mind's just not, it's not in this space, but my observations were. And you start to realize how powerful that can be when you're sort of operating on visual cues only, and it's not engaging the deeper memory, because that can be really, especially if you got ants running around, then you're picking data from visual cues around the room. And at a distance, I tell my students one of the worst and probably most primal tools that you can use is just pure visual observation, because that can be done at a distance. And the more distance you have, either from your thinking or just proximity, it diffuses what you're seeing. And if you're not giving your brain the pleasure of the appropriate cues of what you're seeing, which might mean you have to get right up close to it, then chances are you're going to be grabbing the wrong part of your operating system to respond to it. And that could be, just sort of seeing an interaction in the hallway, but you don't have an understanding of the relationship. I mean, obviously, more information, better. The more senses you can engage to actually engage, that's good stuff. You make me, I'm connecting to something like a different space altogether, where some of the students that I work with are nonverbal, and them letting me know that I've made a mistake is really fascinating to me, because I don't get that clear call out. Like, Clough, remember you said I could do this thing, or you remember we had an accord that this is how I am. We know this is what I do. We know. So this is the look I'm getting from the kid. There's all the information that when I'm actually able to engage my long-term memory with my visual cueing and every other sense, right? My empathy engine. That's gonna be trademark, right? My empathy engine is engaged. See, you took a second there. You got back to it though, right? We haven't really marketed that one really well. Empathy engine labs. So when I get those things all in check and I really cue in to the conversation that I'm in, and you only know that when you're actually in reciprocity. If you're not in reciprocity, it's not a conversation. It's just you sort of using one-sided data to measure and judge what you're seeing. But as soon as you can let in the cues that you're getting from the other side, it changes, and it changes so fast. And most times in that moment, that's where I'm apologizing. I'm like, oh yeah, sorry, my bad. You're on a nourishment break. Go ahead. Or right, you had said that you need to pause and close your book and listen to music. So some of my students right now that I work with, being nonverbal, sometimes their reminder to me is that they just will activate and correct a thing. So I have a student that I could be right in the middle of a lesson, something we're working through, or the student is working through an activity. So this is in the community class that I learn with. The child will stand up and go and do a thing. Like, for instance, one of the students notices and needs to close drawers and cupboards. But this can also be anything that is between sort of states. So it's not entirely open and it's not entirely closed. It has to be sort of set at one of those things. More times than not, it's closing the thing just to close it up. And that creates a really interesting response mode, because there's no pre-queuing or request to go and correct. I just have to make sure that I'm aware of how they're moving, because I need to get out of their way. But if I perceive it as they're leaving their seat, they're going off task, they're not doing what's been presented to them, without understanding where they're drawing their cue from, which could be anywhere in the room, they've noticed that a door is open. Me getting in the way of that thinking creates not only confusion, but it can also actually create some escalation that then it does become incumbent on me and my team to sort of then bring everything back down to so we can get back to, you and I talked about that nice starting point. And the other part to it, we started talking about this sort of concept of entanglement, the idea that not really knowing the story that's going on at the exact same time because something happened away from you. So that energy between, let's say, the bad start to the morning, and likely that the person in front of you is feeling it, and maybe the other human that's in the relationship that is feeling it. I don't know if it's just that the cupboard is open in the class. Because again, for some of my students being nonverbal, they're not going to share with me in the same way. Clough, I had a bad morning. I was up at 4 a.m. in the morning, getting on the bus this morning was a headache. They're just not going to present that information. So being able to unwind or untangle what's fueling a little bit of the anxiety in front of me is really complex, fascinating and complex, and constant. It's that those queuing systems, not only for it's the same setting. I'm trying to gather as much information within a tight window. I still have to try and do it with a tight window, and it really, I'm not great at it yet. I'm not. So I've and I've mentioned other people. So I'm newly in an ASD program, and I'm really having to add daily so many new schema to sort of understand relational teaching and reciprocal communication, not the one-sided where you're just sort of delivering. And I'm not very good at it. I think it'll come in time. But I can say right now, I'm really dependent on my team to help me. Like, yeah, Clough, it's okay. It's that third party in between, the mediator. It's okay, Clough. Let him kind of do his thing, and he'll be back on task right away. And I'm kind of trust. I'm like, okay, I don't have a connection to this part of the child. I don't have a connection to this part of what fuels them, and they do. So I have to extend the trust to my colleagues to sort of help me understand what possibly had entangled the kid that day. It's complex stuff. I'm digging it, but it's a space that I think going into it, I didn't have a full scope of the complexity. I'm gaining an appreciation of the learning that I have to do to get better at my job in order to build relationships in a way that I think I'm doing it well. So.
Did you know that this week the schools were closed one day here in my region?
I saw it. I think, yeah, you posted something up sort of relating to that. I forget what it was. We did not have a school closure, but that was one of the things I wondering if we could go there.
I'd love to go there, and if you want, I can kick it off.
Yeah, kick it off.
Wednesday morning, my son had a 6:30 a.m. hockey practice, and the night before, it was one of those situations where freezing rain was coming, and it was supposed to go all day on Wednesday, and blah 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 blah. So all the teachers are paying attention, and the parents are paying attention to the weather, and then in the morning paying attention to social media feeds and announcements coming from the school board. So for a 6:30 a.m. practice, I'm up earlier than I normally am so I could prepare for my day and then get my son to practice. They usually make the call at around 6 a.m. So we're getting in the car at 6 a.m. to go to hockey, and right before I drive away, I check my phone one more time to see if there's any information, and there was none. So I put the phone away and I drove to hockey. As we're like 2 minutes away from the rink, we're listening to the radio, and the DJ says, "Good news, kids! All schools in Waterloo region are closed. That includes public and Catholic. So no buses are running, and the schools are closed." So I'm like, all of a sudden, like my son and I perk up a little bit more than usual for these morning practices. Pull into the parking lot, throw the car in park, pull up my phone, and there's a text from my wife. "Is this for real?" And there's a screenshot of a Twitter thing and a tweet. And I wrote back and I'm like, "Yeah, it's for real. It's legit." And I just heard on the radio. And I'm like, "I got to go. Like, we're at the rink. I got to get him ready for hockey." And she's like, "Okay, good night." So she's going right back to bed. And for me, I have this thing. It's the snow day dilemma. I gave it a name one year. It's the curse of the snow day. When you find out early in the morning that it's a snow day, I'm so pumped and so high that I can't go back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm up at 6 bouncing off the walls. So we go into the rink, and every time my son and I are sitting in the dressing room, and I took a selfie with him, how happy we were when we found out we didn't have to go to school. Because you can imagine these mornings are rushed. Like, he has to come off the ice earlier than everybody else so I can get him to school in time. And so it's relatively stressful because I'm like, okay, get off the ice, get your stuff off. You can eat in the car, and I'll drop you off, and then I'll go to work. And so it gets kind of stressful. So I'm like, well, you can stay on the whole time today because we don't have to go anywhere after this. And every time a parent would walk in, I'm like, did you hear it's a snow day? And they're just shaking their head like, look at Roland. Roland's so happy, right? They were enjoying that. And some of them didn't know. So I tell them, and their face would go like this. They drop. They're like, I'm like, what's wrong? They're like, well, that means my kids are going to be home. That means I can't work from home. So I best be going into work today. So you've got the whole opposite experience.
Yeah.
I'm literally bouncing off the walls. I'm taking pictures with the kids, and we're all just like happy. Anyway, Wednesday, ice day. Thursday, buses canceled. So I had to go to work, which that's fine. It's my job. But Thursday was, I know I'm veering off course, but I want to drop it here, and then you can say what you want. Thursday was the first day that my Hulk gloves actually came out and were used by a student, like on his accord. And I have a picture that I'll show you. So this little dude here, we did a lot of 3D printing that day, and he was having a rough go. And so I'm like, smash it. Like, what are you waiting for? Smash it. Get through that learning. You need to be here, and you're here. What's in the way? Bust it down. Let's do this. So I was like a cheerleader. Like, come on. He's like, can I get the glove? I'm like, get the glove. Puts it on. He's literally like working on 3D printing, wearing this glove, which is, we were dying laughing the whole class, because once you put the glove on, your arm is useless.
Yeah, I know.
You can't use it.
One-handed typing.
And I was joking about it. I put them on one day, and I was trying to use the mouse of the computer, and the kids were just dying because nothing would work. Anyway, so he put the glove on, and it did something. Like it did what it's intended to do. It kind of took him out of the frustration and into, I'm getting through this. And we're going to figure this out. And so that's a picture of him near the end of the day holding what he was able to create from the 3D printer that was in his mind, that he got out of his mind, and wearing the Hulk fist to show like he smashed through the difficulties to get to the good stuff at the end. Anyway, snow day was epic. I love me my snow days, and for anybody who's rolling this and rolling that, say what you like. I was so happy that I could hang out with my family for another day. And to be honest with you, just a day to just relax. I did some IEP stuff, like I did some stuff, but it was just a day to chill. So that was mine. I want to hear about your position now.
Well, yeah, I have the same sense. I mean, you get there's this strange energy the night before that just, it sort of, it's not even necessarily on your radar. Like I don't spend gobs of time watching the weather. Like it doesn't. I know that I have friends and I have colleagues that they watch. It's important to them. They need to know what the weather is going to be. Like, one of the funny running jokes in our house in the morning is like, I'm most times I'm the first one up in the house, and someone will ask me, what's it like outside? And my response often is, well, I haven't gone outside yet. And it kind of speaks to how I deal with weather. It's experiential. So I'll go and I'll measure what I need to do by actually standing outside in it, which is like totally old school, right? Like, you ever heard of the weather rock? Helps you tell the weather. It's like, if the rock is wet, it's raining. If it's white, it's snowing. If it's dry, it's warm out. That's me. I kind of take it from the weather rock perspective. I need to sort of go out in it and then make a decision accordingly. My family's not like that. My spouse is a little bit more watching the weather and sort of gets in her head. Regardless, I think once you start to think about it, once it gets on the radar, it's really hard to get out of your head. So, you know, the moments where I really wasn't paying attention to the weather, but then I hear a kid say, oh, there's like a big storm front coming in. Well, then I'm like, oh, curious. Like I'll take a peek then, but I'm not the prognosticator trying to figure out what the next day is going to be like. So snow days for me, and I mean, we call them inclement weather days. That's the jargon in my board. It's a contentious issue in our board. Part of it, I think, made worse by how interconnected now communications are. You know, at any one moment, you can see at the exact same time what each school board is doing. And it's creating really fascinating conversations around why is one board doing one thing and another board's doing another thing. And on one hand, there's a real funny, what's the word? A funny, the word is like symptom, but it's not symptom. But it's basically because we have access to all this information, I think sometimes what happens is we forget where the information's coming from, just because it's all on the one screen in front of us. So if I decide to follow 4 different school boards, and I get the information in the morning saying what each school board is doing with an inclement weather day, I know individuals that will automatically say, without any further thought analysis, well, if this is happening in Halton, what's up with, you know, York Region? Or if this is happening in Toronto, what's up with York Region? And it almost completely, we're jumping the shark here. Like, do you realize that that's 75 kilometers away? And the geography is completely different. The topography is different. Body of water, no body of water. Like all these things that really are climatologically, there's science there, whether you sort of understand or not. But because it's all on the same page, it creates a whole lot of what about us? What about us? And I know that right now, one of the hot topics, the way it's generally framed is, well, if it's not safe enough for the buses to drive, if it's not safe enough for the children to be waiting outside, then, you know, what's up with expecting staff to come in? Because one of the things our board has more frequently than not done is the schools are open, but all buses and public transportation, and even sometimes the bookings will be canceled as well. So they'll say we're not going to have anything. Any scheduled events that night, they have to be rescheduled. So I'm kind of sitting and waiting to see how this transpires. Our director has sent out a few communications that they're re-examining that now soon. They're sort of thinking about how they're going to address it better. One of the phenomenons of the school that I'm at right now is that there's the community is not, the percentage of students that are dependent on public transportation, like school board based transportation, is quite small. So our school, large school, probably 1,300 students, maybe that's an average size school. I'm thinking we were probably running at least at 40% on the inclement weather day, 40, maybe even creeping up on 50%. Now, not all kids stay for the whole day, but there's other schools that it'll be a ghost town. There will be, you know, less than 100 kids in the school. My context where I'm at is it's interesting to me because the students that are with me in the community classroom, they're dependent on public transportation. They'll take buses in, they'll take cabs, they're cabbed in, and a couple of the parents will drive their own children in. And so we will have a lot of staff and sort of very few students because there's the complementarity of having EAs and CYWs in with us. And one of the things that happens is that because some of the support staff are assigned directly to a child, that if that child doesn't show up that day, the support staff doesn't get to stay for the whole day. And that has to do with their relationship and contract with their agency that sort of is supporting the child. So there's a whole mix of sort of interesting staffing implications on those days. On the day that this previous inclement weather day, when I got there ahead of what the perceived weather front was going to be. I pulled into the driveway of the school and the gross stuff was just starting to come in. And so right away we use Teach Assist, which is it's a communication program. It's a marks program. It's your teacher information program. Within there, when you open up, you go into the actual program, it tells you if you have an on-call, which is covering that on-the-fly covering for a teacher that is not coming to work that day. So I got an on-call and I went up to cover a class, and then I got relieved of that on-call because we had several teachers come to our school instead of driving to their school that day, which is one of the provisions in, I don't know if it's the same for you, but you can go to you have to just show up at work somewhere. So if you make an attempt to make it to your workplace, but it's still, you consider it not safe to go the full distance, I could, if I wanted to, I could go to my kid's school for the day. I could go to an elementary school and I would sort of call my principal and say, I'm checking in from such and such a school. I'm going to be staying here for the day. And then I'll be doing whatever tasks as assigned by that principal. Or I could go to a high school. I have both very close. But as it ended up, I got there before the weather got bad. And I was relieved twice covering other people's classes because teachers arrived at our school that would have been driving. So I'm all the way in the west of our region. These were teachers that would have been driving all the way to the east, and they just were not feeling like it was a safe drive. So there's a lot of I look at that day as there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens. There's always a lot of conversation, and people double down on it that our school board should be doing something and what they are doing isn't enough. I look at it a little bit like the lens where you're going. I've often thought about what our crash kits look like for days when, like this, where you're not going to get to the regular programming, but you want to have something that's kind of cool and fun and connected. And I look at it as an opportunity to kind of create some memories with the kids. It was very much like that I had on the last day of school, the last day of the semester, having only a few students show up, but we sat and we had one of the best kind of life conversations ever. So it's optimizing that ratio, which every class has a different one, where you really feel like you can get to the good stuff with the students that are in the room. And the lesson takes on a different life. Sometimes it's a completely improvised lesson. Sometimes it's an extension of a lesson that you've done in the past. Sometimes it's a brand new thing. A kid comes back and said, I want to do more of this. Can I take it to the next level, sir? So I think about these days when we have an inclement weather, and it is likely, it's partially like a bell ringer. What could get kids that are able to come to school so they're not making the decision to stay home? And then the kids that do show up that want to have purpose in being at the school, you're sort of collecting these two. There's still going to be always students that are just like, yeah, whatever, I'm not coming in. But what happens in high school often is the mentality, because they're all on social media as well, the students, and checking this out. Why bother going in that day? Nothing's going to happen. And it's hard to wrestle with that reality because it isn't a normal day. Programming will not be, you can make it as normalized as you want, but when it's inclement weather, then you have to shift assessments around like you can't do like you would normally do, unless somehow all your kids showed up that day. So if you had a test scheduled for that day, you'd have to reschedule it, just as an example. So I thought about that. I think about that often is what could a school be doing to offer alternative or enrichment or just out there programming on a day like that. So for the students that are showing up, they can kind of get a peek at some different stuff. Whether or not, and that's the crash kit that I was sort of referring to before. What's your crash kit that everyone's kind of on board for? You might have multiple versions of it, but here's what we're going to be running this day. Do we run it like an unconference day? Do we have extra wellness activities? Do we have intramurals for those that show up? Like, what can you do to sort of have some creative programming on these days that could easily just be, I don't know. You sort of miss the opportunity to do something cool with it. That's my thinking on inclement weather.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome, man.
I know my school is dependent on bus. I think there are Out of the 22 students in my class, I think there are 5 of them that do not rely on the bus. So the first time we had a bus cancellation day, 6 students showed up to school, and I would argue that 2 out of the 6 only came because they had an older sibling who was in the school play and had to come to school to like continue to prepare for the play because it was the opening night was imminent. And so what happened there was parents drove in both of the kids, the younger one and the older one. So I would have had 4 kids that day if it wasn't for the play. And I give a big thumbs up to my principal, who came onto the PA, an hour into the day and said, listen, there's not a lot of people here. So if you need to combine classes to do things, or if you want to combine classes so that you can have a little bit more time for preparation, like work on your report cards or your IEPs, like go for it. You're not going to go for it. Like, we approve. What are you going to do with 3 kids for a full day? Like, bring some classes together and make it work. Which was like, as soon as I was in the staff room when that happened, and everybody just looked at each other and there was like a sigh of relief, like, okay, we're being permitted to think outside the box. We're being permitted to take advantage of the day. The students are here. They're going to be cared for and they're going to learn something. But instead of having like 3 kids in every class, let's bring 4 or 5 classes together. One teacher can take this hour while the other teachers go and do what they need to do. And then we work off each other. We work together. So that was really awesome to hear that. I've never heard that from a principal before. But to be fair to the principals I've worked for that I really respect and miss working for, you don't get a snow day every year, or you don't always get bus cancellations every year, and depending on the day and the school culture. At this school, there's a lot of kids on a bus. There are lots of newcomers from hot countries. So when it's cold out, they're not coming to school because they're like, I'm not walking in that. It's a culture shock for them. But the other day, I had 10 kids. So I think what happened, my wife and I talked about this. What happened was parents had just spent an entire day with their kid. And then the second day in a row, buses are canceled. So spend a whole other day with your kid and miss work again, or drive them to school because they need to be at school. So I had 10 kids, so almost half my class. And, I said to them, listen, we've got some really exciting things on the go. I'm not going to teach you anything new because I'm missing half the class, but we can go deeper in what we've already learned. So that's when like the STEM activities came out. And it's really cool because I can say to them, we've been working a lot on using the 6 competencies and deep learning. And I basically said to them, okay, we're gonna really focus on collaboration today. So we looked at the student-friendly collaboration progression rubric. That was a mouthful. And did like a quick self-reflection. Where are you at? What can you do today to kind of move up on the scale? We did a little bit of that, and then I let them loose. And it was one of those things where I was stationed centrally, and they were coming to me for troubleshooting, advice, demonstration of knowledge, like good stuff, right? And I'm assessing as they keep coming back and forth, and what I hear and what I see. And so those days, even though you're not, in my opinion, even though we're not moving in the direction that your plan is to move in, it can still be really rich. And it was rich the other day. It was incredible. Actually, I made a video of that day. So I remember at the start of the day, as we were kind of prepping for the day, I said to them, I'm going to be taking photos and video today because I think I can take data from today and I can do something with it. And they were pumped because a day or two before that, 2 days, I guess, before that, we made a video about using tech in our classroom. And then this video was about bringing ideas to life with the whole 3D printing thing. So, you know, I had goals for myself. They had goals for themselves, and it was productive because so yesterday when everybody was back, the kids that weren't at school said, "What did you do yesterday?" And, you know, the ones that were there were like, "Well, we got to do this and we were 3D printing stuff." And I'm like, whoa. It's not like you weren't here, we're making you feel bad thing. It's you weren't here. We had to do something. So we just went deeper in the initial projects that we had started. And then I made sure yesterday to give a chunk of time for everybody to continue with going deeper in our learning for the kids that weren't there. And it turned out being really cool because the vice principal ended up coming in for something. And then she said, "Are you going to be doing this like for this much time?" I said, yeah. So she said, "Okay, I'm coming back. I want to be part of this." So she left and she came back, and then she was part of that adventure that we're on. And it's really cool because it's great for my students to see the vice principal in the room learning with us. It's very powerful. And because she's a female, it's very important for my girls to see and for my boys to see that you've got a female in leadership, and she's walking the walk and talking the talk with us. And then it was really cool for me because it's rare at this big school to have admin in my room and actually see me teaching. So it's important for me because I want people in leadership to see me do my work and to be able to speak to what I'm doing. That's important, especially, you know, if I'm on a leadership journey and I'm planning on going down that road. It's important that people be able to say, no, I can vouch for his teaching. I've seen him do it. I've interacted with his students, yada, yada, yada. So it was really cool, really fun. Inclement weather is tricky though, because we get that here too, right? Like a neighboring board will be off for the day and we're like, well, why are we going to work? You know, that happens. And I love how people pretend it doesn't happen. I love how people pretend that they're not happy about a snow day when really they are, or they're happy, but they pretend not to be because they think, you know, people are going to think negatively of them. Hey, I got 2 kids and my wife's a teacher. If we can have one more day together just to chill, let's do it.
Yeah, it's sort of, I tend to fall on I do a lot more listening than really, I don't play any activist role. I'm kind of neutral. It is, there is an interesting dynamic now with, now that my spouse, now that she's an administrator, because there's responsibilities now. So this is the whole, as work changes, your family dynamic changes with it. So there's a higher level of responsibility when it comes to, you know, something like an inclement weather day. And, you know, I make it, I feel it, I get it. It reminds me of back in the day when I was running restaurants, and when you are the person that is sort of feels responsible, or positionally is empowered to be responsible for other people, then making decisions about what happens at an organizational level is not that easy, no matter how simplistic it seems from the individuals that are sort of responding to those organizational decisions. So stuff used to happen back in the day in the restaurant where we had to make decisions on behalf of our staff that, though we really understood on a human level, is not going to make them feel good. But we had to make decisions. There was a timeline on the decision. There wasn't a lot of deliberation time. A decision had to be made, not unlike these inclement weather days. And then the hope always that I had for myself is that if there was a decision that I had to make quickly with the information that was in front of me, that our management team would go back to the table and say, okay, we action this, but here's what the fallout was. And I think that's partially what's fueling the emotions in my board, is that the voices aren't being, I don't know if the voices feel like their voices have been heard, because there is, like, I was looking at the hashtag for our board this past week, and there was vitriol there. Like, parents were so hard, like they were really harder than the students, talking about, you know, and and to a degree, rightfully so. You know, they're looking at it. Their voice is, I'm concerned about my kid. I'm concerned that you have expectation, that you're compelling me to make a decision that's questioning me being a parent who's a caregiver for this child. You're keeping the school open, which indicates there's an expectation that the students be there. Now, on the inside, it's not really like that. There isn't that explicit expectation that a child should be there just because the school is open. And I think that what's lost a little bit in the conversation is that for some kids and families, the school is the only place that their kids can be between the bells. Family configurations are challenging. Like there's kids, like I usually get to school at 7:30. There's kids already camped out in the front hallway doing work in the morning, or, you know, looking at their laptop. So regardless of I don't think they arrived 5 minutes before me, because they look really comfy. Like they're just like lounging. So they're arriving sometime between 7 and 7:30. I think the school actually opens at 7. So they were there somewhere in that, like that's our day starts at 8:10 with the announcements. So that's an early arrival. And I think to myself, these students, where would they be? Where would they be going? Now, I'm in another space. I'm wrestling with I've mentioned, you know, doing the guidance specialist. And one of the discussions that we're having right now in that AQ is around, you know, schools being the everything for families. And the challenge sometimes where there's there's families and parents that need resources that schools just can't provide. But sometimes the school is kind of like, we'll look into it. And that whole element of just looking into it sometimes isn't always the best conversation to have, but the harder conversation would be, we don't have this resource, you're going to have to look elsewhere. So I bring it back to this idea on inclement weather days, like the school is an answer to the question, but what am I going to do with my kids? Now, high school students, you could argue and say, but they're high school students, could they not stay home? Well, what if they, like, that's a grand assumption, but what if they can't? What if they can't stay home? And I don't know what the reasons. I won't even try and impose any thinking on that, but I'll accept that there's reasons where a family say, no, we want you at school. We know it's a safe, dry, well-lit, social environment where a whole bunch of other adults are going to have some eyes on you for the day. And I like that idea. And that always gets lost. I think that just kind of disappears really quickly in the conversation, especially when we're comparing, well, I'm looking on Twitter right now and the next board over has canceled everything. Why? You know, because it's that profound, the profound bell that kind of gets rung on this is all about the safety of travel. But what about the safety of refuge? And for some people, there's no choice. There's no choice. So inclement weather days. I'm sure we'll probably have at least one more conversation or be able to tap, you know, on this one before we're not even out of February, right? So one of ours, we had an inclement weather day. Was it during exams? No, I think it almost got there. I don't know if they declared it, but they had already said that if we had, because our exam schedule is a 5-day schedule. So there's the first 4 days are like period 1, period 2, period 3, period 4, and all the exams, all the courses that exist in each one of those periods, that's the day that the exam gets written on. And then the 5th day is what they call performance exam days. So let's say drama might be running their kind of final stuff there, or tech courses. So they run the labs and the loud stuff on the last day. And they're already talking about that if we got hit with an inclement weather, then they'd have to shift to the performance day for one of the exams, or to double up on exams. Interesting or not interesting, the EQAO, the grade 9 EQAO math assessment at my spouse's school, they had an inclement weather on that day. So it had to be rescheduled. So there's other conversation, and this has happened to me at other schools before. What happens when the OSSLT, so these big piece things, OSSLT and the EQAO math fall on a day where it's an inclement weather day? Those are always, again, I don't have a full understanding of the organizational. You talked about ants before, all going on doing different things. I can only imagine what that anthill looks like when board to board, you can't run standardized tests, which are supposed to be run all on the same day. Supposed to be, right?
I have a question for you before we shut this down.
Okay.
So what is your wife's responsibility? The schools are closed, so she doesn't have to go into school. Does she still try to go into school, or does she? Okay.
Well, no. So wait, the school's not shut down though.
What happens when a school does get shut down?
It hasn't happened in my. We're in the same board, my spouse and I. It hasn't happened.
You've never had, in all your years with that board, there's never been a school closure day?
No, in my memory, the closest thing that has happened was there was I think it was a PA day. I believe it was a PA day. There might have been one school day where the weather that was coming in was perceived to be so dangerous that they started to get people out of the schools faster. And I think there was one PA day where we were told to go home. It was like maybe 1 p.m. in the afternoon because it was just a brutal. And what was interesting is that even though people were starting to go home at 1 p.m., I think it was rain, and because I remember there being a lot of snow in the time between arriving at school and leaving, and then there was freezing rain, so there was like this glossy crust on the top of it. So even though everyone was heading out like between 12:30 and 1 o'clock, all of us were out there in the driveway helping each other to get out. So it was like almost 3 o'clock by the time all the teaching staff and support staff got out of the driveway, because we were shoveling each other out. We were scraping each other's driveways. We're pushing cars out. But I will say admin was still in the building when we all left. So captain of the ship, they're staying behind to make sure all that happens.
Right. I get that situation. But in a situation here where the schools are closed, admin is not required to go in if the schools are closed. But
are they required to be on duty?
I think they're on duty 24/7, 365.
Right.
So, I mean, if something happens, they need to go to their building. They have to go to their building. But
agreed.
I know on like when the schools are closed, I know of principals who they're at home with their family. And some wake up really early and just go no matter what. And then they find out when they get there, well, schools are closed, but they're there, so they'll work. But yeah, no, I know. I know a couple of administrators, and one of them told me a story about something happened over Christmas break. There was a fire at his school or something, and he had to get his stuff on and go deal with it because it's his school. So they're on 24/7, 365, no matter what.
You started by asking, what's her responsibility. I don't know. I don't know what that, like, I don't know if there's something in there that would say, you know what, you have to go up and check this thing out at the school. Right. We've got the sensors are going off, and there's a breakage on a window, or we've got motion detection. I don't know. I would think that I almost fall on the, she might be asked to go. I really don't know, dude. That's a good question.
That's the homework for this week.
Find
out what your wife's responsibilities are as a vice principal. Now, the Education Act says her responsibilities are whatever the principal gives her. So basically, if the principal texts her and says, hey, schools are closed, but there's an issue and I can't get there right now, I need you to go in, or can you get in by this time and check this out because I have to be somewhere else or something. Because I think that's one of the scary things about admin. When you read the Education Act, the vice principal has no responsibilities and all responsibilities. It's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the principal gives you, it's yours.
Go do it.
Go do it. Yeah.
I will ask though.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I could ask my admin too. I just know that both of my administrators at the moment have children who are like out of high school or at the end of high school, and so it's no big deal for them to get in their car and go to work. Like, you know what I mean? And one of my principal, his wife's a teacher. So on snow day, she stays home and he may go in, he may not. I don't know. It all depends. And it depends too, like, I'm sure if they can't get out of their house, if they're snowed in, they just can't physically go, then they can't go.
Yeah, they would have to have language in there made all.
Well, I'm sure
made your best attempt.
I'm sure that a principal would call their superintendent and say, "Listen, I'm literally trapped, so I can't go." And
well, you know what, dude? Let's go back to what I'd called it. What's the crash kit?
What's the crash kit? Yeah.
What's the crash kit on this one? And crash kits we don't often think about. We just don't, right? We make plans. We make kind of plans just in case, but crash kit. I first came across the idea of the crash kit. I know we're going to close it up. Was again running the restaurant. So we had power outages in downtown Toronto, and we knew how to do everything to the detail as long as we had power. And it was such a big concept that it never crossed the table. How do we do if we lose power? What do we do if we lose power? And that became our crash kit. And we learned hard and fast what to do first, like because we didn't have any information. All we had was reactivity. The first time that when they were putting in Dundas Square way back in the day. So this is back like turn of the millennium here. Did I do that right? Turn of the millennium when we flipped to like 2000. Yeah, I think I did that right. When they were doing that construction, they were clipping power lines all the time. And we had sort of like flickering and to the point of if anything went down in the Eaton Center, that impacted us as well. So, a gas leak in the Eaton Center, they're shutting down the Eaton Center and they're saying, get out. Well, again, we have a live fire. God, there's so many parallels here between this and education. We had a live wood fire that was being vented through an HVAC system that was powered by electricity. Well, when that HVAC stops, imagine having your fireplace and you just close the flue. Well, that all goes into your house. So that's what happened in the restaurant. So we even had to consider the fact that so few of our windows could be opened. So how do we vent out smoke? And then how is it different if it's 9 a.m. when we're doing prep? But in this particular case, the two times the major ones, we were full on lunch. You remember the blackout? The actual blackout, when was it back in 2003? No. When was that? 2003? In the summertime, there was that major blackout a couple days long.
Yeah, I remember that.
Our restaurant was up and running. Right? Our restaurant. So we had two construction blips, plus we had that blackout. So it really got me. And at the time, I'm not thinking geez, I wonder what the applications are to education. But I've carried through this idea of it's not emergency plans. That's different. Crash kit means that you have a parallel entanglement. You have a parallel universe inside whatever that box is that you can turn on when you need it, so that it's not business as usual, but you can get to some business when the situation gets unusual. And yeah, like the crash kit. I'm gonna ask her about that. You know what I love the fact is that when I say, so you and me talking here, when I say I'm going to ask, it's not like I have to do a tweet or something. I'm going to go upstairs and have coffee with her, and I'm going to ask her about it directly.
And what might happen from that is she might consider now her crash kit and might start putting together a crash kit. Like, for example, you and I both have spoken about what happens when you're getting ready to go to school in the morning and your kid pulls over and starts vomiting. Like I don't know about you, but I have a crash kit for that. And it's every night, and it's you have to put in some work, right? Like, so every day at the end of the day, I close my day book and I put it aside, and then I pull out a folder that says supply plans, and I just leave it on my desk.
Mm-hmm.
Because part of the issue, the big part of my crash kit is, okay, I can't go to work, but I have nothing prepared for someone else to walk in and deal with my class. I have my day plans, but my day plans are written for me. My supply plans are written for any human that walks in my room, can read it and do exactly what they're told and be able to function at a high level, right? my day plans are not like that, which I don't know if that's good or bad, right or wrong, because I write my day plans for me, not for anybody else. Anyway, long story short, because of the crash kit talk, I know I've got a crash kit for my classroom, and so do you.
Yep.
Based on our kid, you turn over, they're vomiting. Yeah, I'm not going to work today, but the crash kit's there waiting for somebody.
Dude, parallel universe. There you go. Yeah, we engage parallel universe. Here's how the day's gonna go.
Parallel universe. Draw that somewhere. Write that down, because that is something we could work with at DeCodEd Industries. I sound like a salesman now. Parallel universes. We can market that somehow.
So we got quantum entanglement, parallel universes, crash kit,
empathy engines,
and empathy engines. That's almost messy enough.
The empire that makes no money. I love it. I'm paying for this. Like, I pay to house our MP3s. So we've got these great ideas, and we're paying for the idea. Nothing's happening. Well, Chris, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for coming on again. We're at episode 21, season 2. Our DeCodEd YouTube channel is like, I love that place, man. Sometimes when I have a free minute, I go there just to watch one of your reflections again, to hear what you have to say. I love what we're building there. I think it's great. I think it's cool. I like
I told you the whole you doing the creative, DeCodEd creatives. That's cool.
It's fun.
Some of that I haven't had a chance to upload. Do you know, can you upload a song to YouTube?
Like an MP3?
Yeah, or would I have to sort of feed that through my would it have to be posted as a podcast to get it fed there? Like the path to it. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever tried to do a straight up. I don't think you can.
MP3 to YouTube, there might be a way, because I know that what we normally do, what I do is I take YouTube and turn it into MP3. So let's see if MP3 to YouTube.
Because I'd like to put some of the GarageBand, the little songs that I've made, and just hang them on there. It'd be a good place to house it before they get their weight. Do you even remember I made you when you talked on Chasing Squirrels? Do you have a copy of the song that I made for our episode? Do you remember that?
When we talked?
Yeah, because I talked to you on Squirrels.
I don't think I grabbed the song or anything like that.
I'm going to reshare with you, because that was one of my early things that I was doing for every single, I think my first 10 or 15 chats, I was making a song, like in it, messing around with loops and stuff on GarageBand.
The grind.
Yeah.
The grind, eh?
The grind has changed.
The only thing I want to grind up now is, like chuck beef to turn it into a burger. That's what I want to grind.
Yeah, I was actually thinking I'm going upstairs. I'm going to make myself a breakfast burrito.
Nice. Okay, well, I think I'm going to hit stop now, because probably people don't want to hear about our on-ramp, but that's kind of what it sounds like, right?
It's the off-ramp.
The off-ramp. What did I call it?
The on-ramp, but it has that same flavor.
No, you're right. This is more of off-ramp stuff. So, peeps, we're going to let you go and live your life. Do whatever you do. We're going to do ours. Have a good one, Chris.
You too, man. Take care.